Cinemajaw is sponsored by Overcast, an independent podcast app that embraces the open world of podcasting instead of locking it down. No exclusives, no premium content, no paywalls. Just a great podcast app for everyone. Get it for free in the App Store.
And we thank them for their support. You're listening to Cinemajaw, the greatest movies podcast ever, recorded on location from our respective homes in Chicago. My name is Matt Kay, and with me is...
Rye the Movie Guy. And this week on Cinemajaw, Matt, we step into a time machine and go back to the 1950s as we cover our top 5 favorite films set in the 1950s.
Which 50s archetype would you have been, Ryan? Would you have been like a greaser or like a varsity jock kind of guy, or one of the nerds with the suspenders?
Probably one of the nerds with the suspenders.
I would have been a greaser. I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind.
It's funny that we have those stereotypes in our minds. Think back to Grease or those kind of films that depict the 1950s so well. These are films set in the 1950s. I want to make this clear at the top, Jawheads. Not made in the 1950s. So these are films made after the decade that reflect back on set in the 1950s.
Right, exactly. Good distinction, Ryan.
We're doing this because we have 2 movies that we're reviewing, Matt, that are both set in the 1950s.
Indeed, 2 good movies. A little foreshadowing. Vast of Night and Shirley.
And to help us with our top 5 list, and he has also seen both these films, we have a great guest who's going to be joining us.
Yes, Gregory Kasunich is here. He is an animator, filmmaker, friend of a friend. So can't wait to talk to Gregory.
Anybody who's a friend of Elias is a friend of ours, okay?
Indeed. Yeah, we meet a lot of interesting people through Elias Rodriguez, and I'm glad to see that tradition continue.
Yes, Gregory is calling in from LA. We'll be talking to him. And Matt, because of The Vast of Night is a directorial debut, I thought this would be a good time for you to take Gregory on in first feature movie trivia. So think of directors' directorial debut features.
Okay, I'm going to get creamed.
It is still Spike Lee month here, Matt. We missed a week, so we got to double up our Spike Lee celebration here.
We sure do.
Let's start with a Spike Lee fact.
Okay, Ryan. During the 1990 Oscars ceremony, while announcing the Best Picture nominees, Kim Basinger caused some controversy when she ignored her scripted text and instead said, "We've got 5 great films here, and they're great for one reason, because they tell the truth. But there's one film missing from this list that deserves to be on it, because ironically, it might tell the biggest truth of all, and that's Do the Right Thing." Spike Lee would later thank her for it in a 2019 episode of the podcast Unspooled.
That's awesome. I love when they go off script and say their true feelings at the Oscars. I love those kind of moments. And it is shocking that Do the Right Thing did not get even a nomination for Best Picture that year. How ironic that Driving Miss Daisy was the movie that ended up winning Best Picture that year, that Do the Right Thing did not even get nominated. I mentioned when we started celebrating Spike Lee that I have some blind spots of his, and one of them was Do the Right Thing. That's not the case anymore, Matt. I actually watched this film just last night. It shook me. I mean, it's an absolute masterwork, and sadly, I say it is so relevant today. It's 31 years old. If you told me he made it last week, it would make complete sense. To think that he made this 31 years ago saddens me, but also it tells you what a great filmmaker Spike Lee is, because it's still very provocative and gets the audience to question racism, how we see ourselves in everything too as well. It was excellent. I love this movie.
Hell of a movie. I applaud you for filling in that blind spot. One I haven't seen since the late 90s. I need to revisit, but all of his movies are fantastic. Great. I'm really happy we're celebrating him.
Besides just being an absolute pivotal film that everybody should see if you haven't, like I hadn't, it was great to go back and see some of the actors at such a young age. I didn't realize that John Turturro was in this. I didn't know that Samuel L. Jackson was in it, and he's billed as Sam Jackson. Rosie Perez is billed as introducing Rosie Perez. I mean, there's a lot of those as just being a fan of cinema, seeing that I enjoyed on that level as well. So all around, a complete treat. I loved it, man. I can't tell you. It shook me. I had tears in my eyes at the end. I loved it.
That's great, man. And you said you also haven't seen Summer of Sam, right?
No.
Not one of his works that tackles race directly, perhaps, maybe a little bit, but just a really great telling of the Son of Sam summer in New York City. It's a great movie.
We'll see about great. I guess I'll check it out.
Oh, it is. It's a great movie.
It's going to be a great job, Matt. We know that much.
Indeed.
So without further ado, we bring in our guest. Matt, you mentioned he has worked in animation. He has a new short film out. He has a music video out. Gregory Kasunich, welcome to Cinemajaw.
Thanks for having me, guys. Really excited to be here.
Thanks for calling in all the way from LA. This is great.
Welcome to the show, man. So why don't we start off with the animation stuff? I understand, you've worked on some pretty, high-level projects like How to Train Your Dragon, and even gotten some awards for that work.
Yeah, absolutely. I started in animation at this really small animation studio in Burbank, and we were doing direct-to-DVD stuff for like Universal Studios. We did The Little Engine That Could, and this film called Alpha and Omega. And I thought, oh man, I don't know if I want to continue in animation after this. But I got sort of pulled out of that studio by a producer, and they brought me to Dreamworks. And I actually started off in their television department that didn't exist. We were building it from the ground up, and I started there as a coordinator, worked my way up to the back-end production supervisor. So I oversaw the lighting and the effects and the color and the finishing for that TV show, which ultimately ended up winning an Annie Award. So that was a really cool experience.
That is pretty amazing, man.
It's interesting because now when I watch something like the Clone Wars, the Star Wars Clone Wars, I wonder like how long does that animation take? Because you always hear about, Pixar and, whatever studio it being, how long these movies take to actually get going and create. I would imagine the television series just as long, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit of a faster schedule, and you kind of work on this waterfall schedule. So as one's going, the next 3 or 4 or 5 are all in production. But yeah, it's the same thing. And, we used a lot of outside studios, and I know that a lot of different productions don't just do everything in-house. And so a lot of the time I call it directing from outer space. You kind of send your notes and all the information and everything you can, then the animation comes back and you kind of review it and cut it in and kind of make your notes. I'm actually in the process of doing that right now. I'm doing my directorial debut in animation. It's a 2D project that I'm also having, animated overseas. I'm working with some overseas artists. So same sort of process that I learned when I was at Dreamworks.
You've also done some stuff with like live action directing where you're working with actors. I'm curious, which art form do you prefer or lean toward? Is animation your first love, or do you prefer live action stuff as a filmmaker?
I mean, if you're going to make me pick one, I'm going to go with live action, but I feel like animation has always been a part of what I do. So in music videos, I use a lot of comp work where I'll shoot, things, little things in a petri dish and kind of blow them up and add them into and kind of animate them inside of the music video. Or I'll use stop motion in different ways, whether it's in a live action commercial or whatever. So a lot of combining those elements. But at the end of the day, for me, there's nothing better than just sort of working with an actor one-on-one, putting the camera right there and getting that performance and getting those camera movements just right, and then playing it back and being like, oh, there it is. Animation, you need a lot more patience.
And speaking of live action, one that you directed is a short film. It has glitter in the title. What's the name of the movie?
So the original title was Stripper Glitter, and we're like, can we really put that out? And so we went back and forth. I co-directed it with a buddy of mine, another filmmaker called Jerry Spears. And the title we ultimately landed on was When
Short
You Know...
History of Glitter or something?
Right. The full title is When You Know, a brief and thorough investigation into mysterious sources of glitter. And we definitely call ourselves out for being pretentious right in the opening credits, so don't worry.
Oh, I loved it. I thought the credits were absolutely fantastic. And I mean, it's shot in black and white. It's really beautiful. It actually reminded me of like a short of like the Before series, Before Sunrise or Sunset, where you get a couple sort of in a car and walking and having this conversation. But the way it was shot was nice. Dialogue was great too.
Thank you so much. I mean, not to get too far ahead of the conversation here, but The Vast of Night stylistically had a lot in common with that, these really long takes where two people are just sort of talking. And so that's a style that I've always really enjoyed, whether it be early Woody Allen films, where it's in black and white, it's just a couple talking, or like you said, the Before Sunrise, Before Sunset series, and then all the way up to Birdman, where you're doing these long takes and people are kind of tracking through spaces. So it's always something I really enjoyed. I mean, even someone like Noah Baumbach with A Marriage Story recently, those takes are really long. They might not be as virtuosic in terms of camera movement, but they are long performative takes with great dialogue.
But then it really relies heavily on the actors to not screw up, right? So when you're shooting something like that and they're getting ready to walk into the party in this particular glitter movie, and they're walking down that gangway, I mean, there's a time there where it's a long take. The actor screws up, flubs the line, and you just got to do the whole thing again. How frustrating is that?
For me, it's more thrilling. It can be totally frustrating when somebody blows it, but I think that when you're doing something with these really long takes, it's almost more musical, like a musical performance, right? Instead of just recording, one little line over and over again, you're like, let's do it live, get the band going. When everybody is there and everybody's clicking and the camera has to be just there, the boom guy can't trip, or fall or move, the wrong way. And you've got people, waiting off camera to do their performance. There's something like really exhilarating and thrilling about that. And when you nail it, it's unlike, just getting a pickup. It's awesome.
That is an interesting analogy, man. I don't know if I've ever quite heard it put that way, like a live performance from a band where everybody's got to be dancing to the same beat or playing on the right tempo. It's that's well said. Well said.
So our connection here and how we got to know Gregory is through our former producer, Elias Rodriguez. And I understand you actually met Elias on what you would call the film festival circuit. You were out. What were you promoting at the time when you met Elias?
Yeah, at the time that I met him, we met down in San Antonio. I had a music video out for a artist called Bad Driver. The music video was called Background Music, and that was the video I sort of alluded to very briefly, where we shot in these petri dishes, all these chemical reactions that was sort of inspired by, have you guys seen The Fountain?
Oh, I love The Fountain.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So the effects that he did in The Fountain were all these sort of microscopic things that were blown up and created, added into a space. And we were like, well, that's a cool low budget idea. Let's try that. We did that, and that got into the film festival circuit, got onto the film festival circuit and won a few awards, which was really cool.
That's awesome.
Congrats. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the jawheads that want to maybe see your short films, your music videos, follow you along, where's the best place to do so online?
You can just go straight to my website, which has everything that I do, including home roasting coffee. So if you guys want some coffee, I'll send some over to you guys after this podcast. It's just GregoryKasunich.com, and it's not spelled the way it sounds. It's Kasunich. So it's like Kasunich, GregoryKasunich.com.
We'll have a link in the show notes as well for everybody.
Yeah, I'm also on Instagram, and you can find me on Vimeo.
Right on. Do it, Jawheads. Check him out.
Absolutely. Gregory is going to be sitting in on this entire Jaw. He has his top 5 movies set in the 1950s picked out that he thinks is the best. And as I mentioned, he's also seen both the films we are reviewing. And up first is The Vast of Night. Way back, Matt, in January 2019, a small indie film made some noise at the Slam Dance Film Festival. The movie was The Vast of Night, the debut feature from director Andrew Patterson. It was acquired by Amazon Studios, who finally released it on VOD and on their Prime Video service for subscribers. Set in the 1950s and having to do with teenagers discovering a strange radio signal in their small town, Vast of Night piqued our interest. Matt K and I finally were able to plug this movie into our switchboards and check it out.
Number, please.
Hello? Inventory! Large object holding over my land like a tornado!
This is WOTW Radio in Cayuga, New Mexico, and this is the news for the hour.
What would you like to tell us about yourself?
I don't know.
Cool, aren't you like some big science girl? Tell me about science.
Everett, it's Faye. The sound came through the board and interrupted your radio show.
What does it sound like?
What's going on, Everett?
718 here at WOTW. We got a sound we'd like to play that seems to be bouncing around the valley tonight.
Yes, I have a story that might be helpful.
I can tell you what's going on.
The sound we heard out in the desert, it was coming from thousands of feet higher than anything could fly.
They've come here before. They've liked this place. They always have.
The Vast Night opens up with a family watching a weekly television show, very much like The Twilight Zone. The camera slowly zooms in on the screen and eventually goes inside the TV, thus signaling to us that we're watching classic late-night theater. We follow Everett as he walks into a crowded gymnasium where a high school basketball game is going to be played. Everett works at the local radio station. He is friends with and has feelings for Faye Crocker, who works as a switchboard operator. On this night, both come across a strange signal, a sound that does not sound normal. Faye takes some calls from frantic people, but eventually the lines go dead. Everett, meanwhile, takes calls on the radio from listeners that have tall tales to tell on where this signal is coming from. The Vast of Night not only tries to pay homage to the Twilight Zone, but also to classic radio plays. The film is filled with long dialogue scenes in which the wonder of the story comes from the person telling it. You can almost close your eyes at times and just listen to the story unfold. However, if you were to do that, you would miss out on a highlight of the movie. That is the slick 1950s look to it. The Vast of Night is very authentic looking. You really feel transported watching it. If you are expecting aliens with lasers or a major spaceship chase, this is not the film for you. The Vast of Night is a unique kind of film. Have patience with it and you will enjoy it. I sure did. Matt, did this movie conjure up your imagination or was it just static?
Oh, no, my imagination was firmly engaged. And I'm really glad you picked up on the fact that this is a love letter to audio, which is near and dear to my heart, obviously, as a podcaster. But it also uses visuals that are done very, very well. In fact, director Andrew Patterson and cinematographer Miguel Mintz have one extended tracking shot in particular that feels sinister as it sweeps from the town switchboard through the gymnasium where the big game is going on, out through a window and all the way to the radio station. It was almost like Sam Raimi-esque in a way. It was a wonderful shot. And to get back to the audio part of it, there are some parts of the movie where the screen will just fade to black during an extended monologue, practically asking you to close your eyes and just listen. So if you told me this script was pitched initially as a podcast, I would say, yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's more about what's heard than what's seen. More evidence of this is the name of the radio station, WOTW. I don't know if you picked up on that, Ryan. War of the Worlds. Did you pick up on that little Easter egg?
I did not. That's nice.
Perhaps the most infamous radio play of all time that also had similar plot points with aliens and flying saucers and such. This movie just works. The two leads, Sierra McCormick as Faye and Jake Horowitz as Everett, are delightful and believable as period teenagers. It's 1 part Scooby-Doo, 1 part War of the Worlds, 2 parts Serial, and 2 parts Twilight Zone mixed well.
Wow. Gregory, your take on The Vast of Night.
Yeah, that's a cocktail I enjoy, that mix that you just brought up. I loved it, absolutely. I mean, from the formalistic approach of the cinematography, letting things play out in long takes, I always love that. Watching something play off of reactions, play as the switchboard operators, listening to these different calls coming in. I loved the musicality of the dialogue and the old-timey kind of words that they would use, let's bake some biscuits and what, all the different things that are kind of come up in that early conversation between the two leads. If nothing else, I'm a huge fan of the Twilight Zone. And so when that opening came in and we're getting that sort of pitch perfect Rod Serling impression with this kind of hilarious riff on that opening, the Twilight Zone opening credits, I was sort of ready for that ride. I will say the one thing that did take me out just a tiny bit was the return to the television set. Every once in a while, we were being reminded as the audience that we're still kind of watching this Twilight Zone-esque show or B-movie of the week or whatever it is. And I would prefer just to live in the world a little longer.
I agree with you. They go back to that a couple of times, and I don't know why. Where all of a sudden it's almost like a crutch you see in bad short films and bad movies where they use this effect to make the stock look like you're watching it on one of those old tube televisions. And it's kind of a cheap effect, really. It worked fine for me in the beginning of the movie, but I agree, Greg, when they keep going back to it, it was a little unnecessary. But that's a minor gripe and what I really enjoyed as a movie.
Yeah, and Matt, you were commenting about the audio, that this film is about audio in general, but it's storytelling, right? I mean, I love the idea that, okay, we're watching a movie and the movie sort of goes inside, like I said at the beginning, of the television. So here we have two forms of storytelling, film and television. He works at a radio station, a third form. The switchboard and hearing the signal through, the airwaves is sort of another form. And then eventually the long focus and concentration on just the people telling the story. All of that, all of the film, the radio, the signal, that's all just a way to get people's story out to the world. And I love thinking about that, and that the film was sort of celebrating just that.
I don't want to spoil anything, but I do want to just let people know that the absolute climax of the movie, the ending, I was a little let down. I almost kind of, and I'm dancing around this, I almost kind of wish one thing that we are shown was left unshown, just to keep that mystery in your mind, because it's almost impossible to live up to your imagination in that sense. I do like where the two characters end up at the end of the film. That was fine. Like, I had no problem with that whatsoever. But what they see right before that, I thought was a little ham-fisted.
I'm with you on that. And I see in our Zoom call, Gregory nodding in approval as well. In fact, the next morning, I watched this like on a Friday night. The next morning, I actually watched the end. I wanted to see it a second time because I was critical of it the first time too. Because it's like, man, it left a bad taste in my mouth. And I woke up the next day thinking, I really enjoyed it. And I rewatched it, and I'm right with you, Matt. I wish they would have just not shown it. Maybe just show the characters' faces. I don't know. They could have handled it differently. Gregory?
Yeah, I see the bandwagon here, and I'm going to jump right on it. I also felt a little let down by the ending. So much of the film engages your imagination, and then to sort of rob you of that just at the end was kind of a bummer. And it's funny you bring up the rewind, because I did the same thing. I thought, did I miss something, or what am I, and I had to kind of watch it again and go, no, that's exactly what they wanted. Again, a minor gripe, because the journey to get there is so amazing. I'll live with that. I can still recommend the film.
Same here.
I have a friend of mine that was asking for recommendations, and he loves The Twilight Zone. And I told him, I just watched this movie, The Vast of Night. And I think for the jawheads and people listening to this, if you're into that, The Twilight Zone or hearing stories of the unknown, it's totally for you. So do check it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
Matt, you got a movie poster quote for me?
I do. This is like a 1950s newspaper headline, Ryan, if you will. Teenage audio sleuths make contact with aliens. That's my quote.
Yeah,
you didn't like it?
Good at all?
No,
not at all.
All right, well, what do you got?
I went with the unknown is fun to talk about.
See, I don't think that's that much better either. The unknown is fun to talk about. How can you talk about it if you don't know?
Gregory, you got anything for us?
This is off the top of the cranium here, but you won't believe what's real to real.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well done.
Gregory wins it. I spent an hour on mine. Gregory just nailed it off the top of his head.
You just right off the cuff.
We're on a 4-jaw scale here. We'll start with Gregory. How many jaws?
Can we do half jaws?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll give it about a 3.5 for the budget restrictions and for working in a genre that's sort of tried and true and worn over so many different ways. To have a really fresh take on it was awesome to see. So especially indie filmmakers, if you're out there with restrictions and you're looking to be inspired, I think this is a great film for that.
Yeah, I think I've read somewhere that this was actually shot for like $700,000, like real shoestring. I could be wrong about that, but I think this is a 3-jaw movie all the way. That's where I'm landing.
I'm landing also on Three Jaws, and I agree. It's a small budget, and it's a fresh take on it. It's something unique that we haven't seen before. We're not rehashing something, so do check it out. Recommend.
Big recommend.
And yeah, since we're doing 1950s movies, right? I mean, the look of the 1950s, they got that right. It made it like a cool look of the 1950s.
Yeah, and I should point out too, this is early 50s, you know, so they still have like the 40s era bodies on the cars, and lots of the men are wearing fedoras. This is a small town in New Mexico, so maybe not the the pinnacle of fashion that might be a couple years behind. It was just really well thought out, really well done. And we talked briefly about the sort of cadence of the dialogue with the words that people use from the era. That's not overdone. It's just peppered in lightly to give it a flavor of authenticity. I thought it was really well done.
After watching it, we did think, let's do our top 5 films set in the 1950s. Gregory, was this a tough list for you to come up with, or rather easy?
I thought it was going to be really challenging. And then I just started thinking about my favorite movies, and like about half of my favorite, my top 10 naturally happened to be set in the 1950s. So I was really excited once I started going down that rabbit hole.
Nice. Well, you're getting us started. What do you got sitting at number 5?
Oh, number 5 for me is going to be Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master.
Wow.
Yes.
This is a heavy hitter at number 5.
I mean, it's a fantastic movie. The look of that picture, if you have seen it, when he's in the department store and they're doing the photo session, that just the way that the lighting and the texture of that, the wardrobe, everything just works so well to really bring that era alive.
Yeah, it's just beautifully shot in general. I know it was presented in some screens, and I haven't seen it, but it was presented in 70 millimeter. The Music Box here in Chicago showed it that way, and I'm jealous for people who have seen it in 70 millimeter because it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. I'm a huge fan of Paul Thomas Anderson's work, and I think, did Robert Elswit not shoot this one? I could be wrong.
Well, throw it in the jaw box.
Throw it in the jaw box. But yeah, the cinematography is absolutely stunning. It's a film for me that gets better every time I watch it. When I first saw it, I was a little at a distance with it, but then with each repeat viewing, I just kind of fall in love more and more. And then, with Philip Seymour Hoffman's performance and, being able to revisit that, it's just incredible.
Nice pick.
Strong pick at number 5. What do you got, man?
All right. Well, hopefully this can follow it up. It was directed by none other than George Clooney. In 2005, tells the story of the McCarthy era through the eyes of one of the greatest journalists of all time, Edward R. Murrow. I am speaking of Good Night and Good Luck. I was I shouldn't say completely, but I was largely unfamiliar with Murrow's role in the McCarthy story. So this was a bit of an eye-opener for me, and it's a really interesting film. Talk about a film shot in black and white. Beautiful to look at, very informative to me because the story had been somewhat lost to time. Fantastic performances throughout, and it's a real thought provoker and strangely still relevant to this day.
Those are the good movies that you see them when they come out and it's relevant, and you watch it 10 years later and it's even more relevant sometimes,
Yeah. And it's totally 50s with the paranoia, with the Russians, and are you a member of the Communist Party, and everything that McCarthy did, in the name,
and the smoking on television. When could you smoke on TV except the 1950s? They were lighting up like crazy.
Probably straight through the 70s, man. Maybe even into the 80s a little bit, but not anymore. That's for sure.
It's crazy.
I remember seeing that film in theaters and being so impressed with Clooney's direction. I was a big fan of Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, his debut feature, and this just kind of upped the ante. And I don't think he's ever returned to that level of craftsmanship as a director since then. So this, to me, is such a pinnacle of his ability as a director.
It sounds like you have not. It sounds like you have not seen Leatherheads.
Oh, I saw Leatherheads. Coen Brothers light. Yeah, that's how I felt about that.
All right. Swings it over to my number 5. Jawheads, I try to come up with movies that I haven't talked about on the podcast before, and I know for a fact this one has never come up. 2004 it came out. The director here was Mike Leigh. I'm going with Vera Drake for my number 5. And this is set in the 1950s London, and Imelda Staunton plays the title character, Vera Drake, who cleans houses by day. And she also has like a close-knit family. She's a loving wife, has kids, husband. However, her family does not know that Vera performs abortions for young women who find themselves in trouble. It's an emotional film, not the easiest to watch. The film paints 1950s London as a dark time. I don't know if there's ever a sunny day in London in the 1950s. And did anyone not wear gray? I still don't know the answer to this, because in Vera Drake, it was gray or black, and that's all anybody wore. There's times where you have the fashion of the 1950s. This is that bland, dark area of the 1950s. But when you see it and it's done right, it really resonates, and it worked so well in Vera Drake. Like I say, not the easiest of watches, but one I would recommend.
Good pick, man. All right, that swings us into our number 4s. Over to Gregory. What have you got sitting there at number 4?
So my number 4, I think a massively, massively underrated film in the oeuvre of the Coen brothers. This is, of course, The Hudsucker Proxy.
Yes.
A lot of people write it off or haven't seen it, don't know about it, and it tells the story of a young wide-eyed Tim Robbins who gets off the bus from Muncie, Indiana, and ends up climbing all the way to the top of Hudsucker Industries to be a rube for the board, so that they can wrestle control of the company once the stock falls, because he's terrible. And of course, in true Coen brothers fashion, everything kind of goes screwy. But what I love about this movie so much is its commitment to sort of the cadence and style of the era in terms of dialogue. Jennifer Jason Leigh does this great fast-talking reporter thing. And it's a little arch in its presentation, but in a way that really, really works for me. And to this day, me and my friends still quote, for kids, when talking about the hula hoop or the frisbee that he invents during the film.
This is a Coen brothers film I have not seen. So this just reminds me that I have to see this Hudsucker Proxy.
I've seen it, but I think, what year did this come out?
I have no idea. I mean, I think it was like early 2000s.
Well, throw it in the jaw box.
Throw it in the jaw box. I saw it when it came. So we're talking nearly 20 years ago, and I have not rewatched it since. So one that I need to revisit. But yes, it is a very good movie that I remember enjoying quite a bit. So good pick. So that swings it over to me. And at number 4, I'm just going to read you the cast and the director of this. If I told you that Matt Dillon, Rob Lowe, C. Thomas Howell, Ralph Macchio, Tom Cruise, and Patrick Swayze were all in a film directed by Francis Ford Coppola, that might pop some heads right off their shoulders. But that is the case with one of my favorite movies, The Outsiders, a tale of a little gang of greasers that find themselves wrapped up in a self-defense murder. One of Ralph Macchio's really early roles. And it's almost like a bit of Stand By Me, a bit of Roadhouse. If both of those movies were directed by Francis Ford Coppola, it's a great movie about brotherhood and male bonding. It's a very masculine movie that I don't think gets enough credit out there. And certainly with the greaser culture in the film, very 1950s.
This was a movie I was really big on, like when I saw it like in high school and everybody was telling you to watch The Outsiders. I don't know. I haven't seen it since then. So it's not that fresh in my mind, but just for Pony Boy, this deserves to be on the list.
Yeah, of course it does. Pony Boy.
Yeah, it's been ages since I've seen it, but this came out when Francis Ford Coppola was at the height of his powers, right? After Apocalypse Now. I don't know exactly. Put in the job box if you guys don't know. But I feel like it came out right in that era when he was just popping off with Godfather and Apocalypse Now and all of these great films.
I actually have the date on this one. It was 83. So maybe kind of later, I guess, right? Because Godfather and Apocalypse Now were both in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so maybe this was towards the end of that like incredible run.
Yeah, definitely. It's such an odd turn for him, right?
It's before Jack, right? That's
for sure. Swings it over to my number 4, and in 2002, this movie came out. It's directed by Todd Haynes, stars the wonderful Julianne Moore and the incredible Dennis Quaid. I'm going with Far From Heaven. as my number 4 pick. This film takes place in 1957. Something Matt Kay knows about. Suburban Connecticut is the location. And Julianne Moore plays Kathy Whitaker, a housewife who discovers her husband is gay. Her husband is played by Dennis Quaid. And of course, Matt, in the 1957, the way to deal with issues such as this was alcohol and domestic violence. Around this time, she also befriends a young African-American who is actually the son of her late gardener. And there's actually more here than friendship. But of course, this is the 1950s, and this also was very frowned upon at the time, that this white woman could, have feelings for a person of color. So it has two heavy themes going on, and the setting of the 1950s is absolute key to the way people dealt with both these thoughts and race relations. Again, maybe not a film everybody wants to watch and have a feel-good mood. I don't know. This is a list, I guess, that I have sometimes. But again, a quality film if you haven't seen it, Far From Heaven.
Into our number 3s we go. Greg, what you got at number 3?
So generally speaking, I really just like movies about making movies. Something about them never quite works. But this one I just love. I'm talking about Ed Wood, directed by Tim Burton.
Yeah, I was hoping this would come up.
I mean, it's amazing. Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands and Batman, great films. But it wasn't until Ed Wood where I really felt like I was seeing, Tim Burton talk about what he loves deeply and truly and honestly in a way. And the fact that he treats the subject matter with such care, where at the same time he makes it very entertaining and takes sort of a little bit of a comedic tilt to moments. It's just a beautifully made film. It's in black and white if you haven't seen it. It's just a really, I almost want to say, a more mature film for Tim Burton when it came out.
That is one of my Tim Burton blind spots. But I mean, as far as I know, right? The funny thing is I've seen like a lot, probably way too many of Ed Wood's movies. We used to just put on, I'm a big fan of like B-movie horror and like creature features, especially those black and white ones. And we'd put on Plan 9 from Outer Space just to laugh at it and all the like wooden scenery and Bela Lugosi's swan song. And was Boris Karloff in that too? Regardless, like that is a movie I have to catch up with, dude.
It's a great one. It's a great one.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And again, just the way that he approaches the subject matter is incredible, that you can see his love for those B movies and the things. I mean, to me, it's so much, it speaks to sort of the idea of like, Roger Corman, who was this huge influence and mentor to somebody like Francis Ford Coppola, but had done that really bad, cheesy Fantastic Four movie and so many other sort of B movies and low budget movies, but was really a mentor and inspiration to a lot of our favorite filmmakers today.
Well, that is an absolute perfect segue into my number 3, because I have a filmmaker here who has made some of the most revered trash movies of all time, but he struck a particular chord with this one, which was remade later into a musical in, I believe, 2007 with John Travolta. And it's fine if you like the remake. I don't blame you. But the original John Waters Hairspray from 1988 is an absolute masterpiece. What it captures so well about 1950s Baltimore. Well, first of all, John Waters was there. So he's not imagining this. This is, stuff that he actually lived. But they get that teenagers in bobby socks obsessing over a television personality, and just the look of the era with the beehive hairdos and the bright pastels and everything. I mean, John Waters is the king of schlock, and I think Hairspray, arguably one of his best movies, definitely in his top 3, in my opinion. It's just a great movie. Ricki Lake, of course, in one of her, if not first roles, certainly one of her very early ones that put her on the map. So
I always say it's her only role. I name another Ricki Lake movie.
Right. She's been in other movies, but that's fair to say, I think.
Yeah. I've seen the remake, seen the original, and I've seen Broadway in Chicago here when one of the big productions came through. And it's actually a wonderful musical to see live too as well. Works on all of them.
It's a little weird going back to the original because you expect it to be a musical and it's not. So You feel like something's missing for the first 10 minutes if you watch it out of order. But I was originally a fan of the movie before I saw the musical. So
Nice. For my number 3 pick, I go with a 2010 film that had to do with Allen Ginsberg. And it's a bit of an experimental film. And playing Allen Ginsberg was James Franco. The movie was Howl. I say experimental film because it's non-linear storytelling. It has some animation elements, so Gregory will like this. It also reenacts his debut performance of Howl, and those moments when they reenact it are shot in black and white. You know, we live in a time now where we can basically go to the internet and find people talking about everything and anything. But the reason why I picked this, if you go back to the 1950s, the world needed people like Allen Ginsberg to show how important it was to express themselves and to be able to talk about these issues and certain things, because nobody else was. And there was all of this policing, if you will, of freedom of speech, that him coming out and performing his own poems was, quote unquote, against the law.
it was a big era for freedoms. Basically, we're extending and exploding. Of course, it led to the 1960s and everything that came with that.
Howl, Matt, you would probably like this one. Check it out.
Okay, I will, man. I'll put that on my list.
Into our twos we go.
My number two is mostly in the 1950s, but it takes a trip, of course, to the 1980s. I'm talking about Back to the Future.
Of course.
1955, November 5th, 1955. I don't think I need to give the summary here. We all, hopefully have seen Back to the Future. It's incredible. When that Mr. Sandman comes in and Marty is kind of spinning on his heels as he walks into Hill Valley for the first time in 1955 and comes into the square. It's like, to me, that feeling of nostalgia and wonder and excitement all kind of hits. So I love the way that they render it and what they did with that time period. And you asked at the top of the show, who would you be in the 1950s? And I probably think I'd be the guy with the 3D glasses.
Oh, yes.
Just runs around. I was like, what's that guy doing? But that's such a good movie.
It is.
So good.
This is where I have a movie that I'm almost 100% positive Ryan the Movie Guy has never seen, likely never even heard of. 2007 Fido. You know this movie?
Boy, it sounds familiar.
Really?
Yeah,
right.
To be absolutely honest.
It's what they call in the biz, right, a zom-com, okay? But it's way more than the sum of its parts. It's actually probably just under Shaun of the Dead as one of the best zombie comedies of all time. Billy Connolly stars as the titular character here, Fido, who is...
I love this guy. That's great.
Right. And Carrie-Anne Moss plays the mom, and it's like the white picket fence, idyllic, suburban. It's what it does best is that 1950s advertising, when you would turn to the back of the comic book and see like the x-ray specs of somebody, that really cool Art Deco sort of design that they did.
Sure.
They nail it in this movie. And zombies, they've invented this collar that controls the zombies, which is just like a part of their life. And they've been able to make them into pets. And Billy Connolly plays one of these such pets. And of course the collar malfunctions and he becomes friends with this little boy. Wackiness ensues. I'll let you discover this on your own, but don't let the term zom-com turn you off, because it's a really wonderful, stylish movie that everyone should enjoy.
You lost me at Zom.
Yeah, I'm sure I did. You got to check this one out, Rye.
All right, swings it over to my number two, and this one came out in 2015. That particular year here on Cinemajaw, I listed it in my top 10 of the best films of the year. It stars Saoirse Ronan, who plays a young woman who immigrates to the United States from Ireland in 1951. The movie is Brooklyn. I love this film. And she ends up in Brooklyn, where she lives in a boarding house at first, trying to get work. Her sister back in Ireland gets sick and doesn't want to tell Saoirse Ronan's character because she wants her to stay in America to have a better life. I put this on the list at number 2, and I was thinking about it, and we're going through a very tough time. And it's a time where I'm depressed by a lot of the things I'm seeing on the news and in the country here in America. And a movie like Brooklyn celebrates actually what's great about America and people coming in from other countries. And to have her come in from Ireland. She ends up meeting this guy who's from a very strong Italian family, and their sort of courtship before they get married is sort of everything that made America great, that these two families that have such differences come together here in this new life that they're both making for each other. It's funny, it's heartwarming, and it gets America right, at least the good of what America it gets right. Needs to be seen. It's a spotlight of a film, I think. Brooklyn. Have you guys seen this one? Gregory, have you seen it?
I've seen it. I love it. Everything you just said nails, that film. It's also just stunningly gorgeous to look at.
Yeah.
The cinematography, every frame is beautifully rendered, and it's so nice. It just gives you that like nostalgic feeling just looking at it. I'm a sucker for those Irish tinged scores, and the music from this is just so beautiful and lilting and heart aching, and it's great. Yeah, beautiful picture.
Yeah. It's one that I only seen the one time at like the press screening when the movie came out. And I've always wanted to see it a second time. Again, why I love doing the podcast. I wrote it down in the journal. I'll be watching this probably in the next month because it reminded me, got to watch Brooklyn again. So,
dude, this is one that came out only a few years ago, right? Did you mention the year?
2015. So 5 years ago.
I might even still have a screener of this. I need to check it out.
All right. It's our number one picks here on Cinemajaw. Greg, what do you got sitting there?
I'm so excited. So when you told me, film set in the 1950s, the one that popped right to the top for me was, of course, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. One of the great... I'm kidding.
Oh,
Please don't kick me off the mic. No, my favorite is The Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
I love this movie. Again, one of my favorite movies of all time. It doesn't take place entirely. I think it starts in the 40s and then kind of moves through the 50s. And that film, in the way, again, we've got a lilting sort of Irish tinged score. If you haven't seen it, see it. It's a classic. Every time it comes on, TBS, you just have to stop no matter what part of the movie you jumped in at to finish it out.
I agree with you, Greg. It is absolutely one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's one that I think it's just a perfect movie. There's really nothing to point to that you could criticize.
I don't think they got the jail cells right, Matt.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like a lot of these period movies really emphasize the cars and the fashion and all of these things. And one thing I really liked about this film is, although it does nail, the production design, so much of it takes place inside a jail. And so we don't get that element of it, but we do get a lot of the sensibilities. And when we finally do come back out of the jail with one of the characters, Brooks, hopefully I'm not ruining this for anybody, the world has changed so much, and it gives you this totally different view of what the world is and the style of what's happening around that very secluded part of society.
Matt, how do you follow up the Shawshank?
Well, I can follow up. It's first of all, it's very, very difficult. But when you're talking strictly a 50s movie, I think I can follow up Shawshank Redemption with the one that popped right into my mind when I heard 1950s, an absolute classic from Will Wheaton, Stand By Me. It had that Goonies feel to it, this adventure with a bunch of kids based on a Stephen King novel also, by the way. Both of those are based on that. They're going to find a dead body, and they have to, mix with the bullies along the way, and they each have to overcome their personal demons. It's more than just an adventure. It's a rite of passage. It's the journey of a lifetime, and it's absolutely timeless. I love every second of that movie, front to back.
Wow, two classics. Now I'm nervous with my number one after you guys go such heavy hitters.
Just go with something based on King, and you'll be fine.
It is based on a book, but it's not a Stephen King book. But it's a film that doesn't get much love here, doesn't get much mention here on Cinemajaw. But it was a movie that, again, when you said 1950s, I just tried to think of something that vision, the fashion, the look of the film. And in 2008, it was the film that reunited Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio, who have only worked twice together, once in Titanic and once in this film, 2008's Revolutionary Road. DiCaprio and Winslet play Frank and April Wheeler, and the film starts actually in the late 1940s when the two meet. And at the time, April has these aspirations to be an actress, but Frank ends up getting a job in sales, and the couple moves into a suburban home in, you guessed it, Matt Kay, Connecticut. what is with this? My second Connecticut film here. And she ends up getting pregnant. And it really calls into, this feeling that the suburban life is sort of the end of their journey of trying to discover who they were going to be, right? Their aspirations that they had. Now it's going to be about the family and growing up. Kathy Bates is in here. She plays the realtor who sells them their home. They become friends with, and her son is played by Michael Shannon. This earned Michael Shannon an Academy Award nomination, I think his first. Nobody's happy after a while. He's not happy in his job. She's not happy that she never became an actress and that her life is now becoming this suburban mom. And they want to have this idea of like, let's just pick up our lives and move to Paris and everything's going to be okay. Of course, they never quite get there. Things get darker. It's a theme now that we've seen explored quite a bit, but when the book came out originally, it wasn't a subject that had been talked about a lot before. A film I think a lot of people have missed. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
I have not.
Another fun time romp from you. Suggestion. That film is so depressing, and I loved it. I saw it when it came out. Huge fan of Sam Mendes, the director. Yeah. I think this was maybe his third film, right after Jarhead and American Beauty. I was really expecting something, I remember the trailers thinking this is going to be a great period drama. We've got Kate Winslet. There's a beautiful romance that's going to blossom. And then I saw the film and was like, well, I don't know if I believe in love anymore. So.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, really, I had some pretty dark picks on my top five.
What's wrong with you, Ryan? Jesus.
I think it's just everything we're probably going through,
Yeah,
it's just coming out of it,
Fair enough.
How about some honorable mention here? Is a couple for you, Matt?
I can go rapid fire here. Cry Baby, another John Waters one. Little Shop of Horrors. Grease. We didn't say Grease. We kind of hinted at it at the top. The Talented Mr. Ripley and Dead Poet Society.
Greg?
Yeah, Dead Poets was definitely on my honorable mention list. There was a film that came out not that long ago called Carol, which I thought was a gorgeous movie film. And I believe Raging Bull has a portion of it set in the 1950s.
Other ones not mentioned: Quiz Show, Capote.
Yes.
Oh, that's great.
And The Tree of Life, with all of the flashbacks to the family growing up in the 1950s, I think captures it perfectly as well.
That might have knocked Hudsucker Proxy off my list. I didn't realize that was the 19. You're right, though. Yeah, in Texas. Yeah, it's great.
Yep.
That's a great.
If we missed your favorite film set in the 1950s and you have Twitter pulled up, shoot us a tweet at Cinemajaw, or you can always email us feedback@cinemajaw.com. What we're going to do is take a quick break. When we come back, we have a review of Shirley plus trivia. Matt versus Gregory. Stick with us.
Sorry, Greg. You sorry why? Sorry I called your mother a hog. And you sorry about teasing me about being left back 3 times, about being on welfare, about me and my brothers having 3 different fathers? All right already. I said I was sorry.
This time, Spike Lee takes a whole new look at growing up in his old neighborhood.
Is the TV on? No! I'm crazy because I got 5 of y'all. Ow! That have run me stark raving mad.
Somebody left the toilet seat up and I almost fell in again.
Shut up, you flat-chested wench.
I gotta eat this.
Black eyed peas have calcium.
All the calcium in the world ain't gonna make up for this nasty taste. Can I have some tricks? No, please. Said no, you idiot.
Give it up.
You know, Daddy doesn't want to fight or yell. All Daddy wants to do is play his music.
In a place called Crooklyn.
And stay off my shoe. We got to live.
All it took to keep it together was a little love, peace, and soul. Alfre Woodard, Delroy Lindo, and introducing Zelda Harris.
That's what family's for. You gotta stick together, right?
Right.
Crooklyn, a Spike Lee joint.
We are back on Cinemajaw, hanging out with Gregory Kasunich. Gregory, it is Spike Lee month here on Cinemajaw. I wanted to ask you, putting you on the hot seat here, what is your favorite Spike Lee film?
Well, I know you guys started the show off by talking about Do the Right Thing. So that's definitely for me my favorite. I saw it in film school. It introduced me to Spike, and for all the reasons you mentioned already, it's definitely my favorite. But if I had to go for a very close second, the recent Black Klansman, I really enjoyed. Again, Spike's ability to mix social commentary with humor, with drama. I mean, that's what you get when you watch a Spike Lee film. It's not just one thing. It's not just one note. It's a mixture of all of these influences, styles and tones that really make it something really unique, something only Spike could do.
Agree. Totally agree. Again, for the jawheads that want to check out your short film, music video, follow you along online, where's the best place to do so?
You can do it at GregoryKasunich.com. I'm also Gregory John Michael Kasunich, Gregory JM Kasunich on Instagram, and Vimeo, it's Gregory John Michael. So I should get those all to be one thing. But yeah, the website's got it all.
Do it, jawheads. Before we get to our review of Shirley and before we play some trivia, we did throw a few items into the jaw box. Let's open up that jaw box.
What's your pleasure, Mr. Cotton?
The box.
We got a box! Oh, what's in the box?
All right, I may be going out of order here, Matt.
That's okay, Ryan.
We'll start with the easiest one here. The budget of The Vast of Night, the best I could find was just under $1 million.
Right, that's what I had said.
It says. Yeah, you had some exact number.
700,000.
Yeah, you had this exact. It didn't say that. It said made for slightly under 1 million. So you might be right, but somewhere in there.
Yeah, I believe I read that somewhere.
You know how these filmmakers are. They don't like to talk budget, No one wants to talk budget. You know how it is.
Yeah.
Hudsucker Proxy. What year did it come out? 1994.
Ooh, whoa. Earlier than we thought.
Much earlier.
Yeah, 94 on that. And then you had asked, Gregory, a question about who the cinematographer was in The Master.
That's right. I thought maybe it was one of the ones he did without Robert Elswit, but I wasn't sure.
And you're right. No Robert on this one. And before we close out this jaw box, a reminder, the jawheads, we're celebrating Spike Lee because his new film, Da Five Bloods, is out on Netflix as of now. So we will be talking about it next week on the podcast, Matt. That is our film we're going to review. So check it out, jawheads. If you see it, shoot us an email, feedback@cinemajaw.com. Let us know what you think. That's it. Let's close this jaw box. All right, Matt, our second review.
I just want to say that you did a great job in the jaw box there, Ryan. We should just leave you in there permanently.
It's tougher than you think, the jaw box. We used to give everybody a tough time. Elias, then Phil had the jaw box duties, then Pat. And me and you, we would just sit there and laugh. Like, what's taking him so long?
Well, those guys would always come out with a nice joke ready to go, especially, I don't want to say especially Elias, because Phil had some good zingers too. That's what you got to do. Work on your comedy bit in the jaw box, Ryan. All right, Ryan, finally, 2020 has given us a movie to truly sink our teeth into, and it's Josephine Decker's Shirley. Can this mysterious Elizabeth Moss psychodrama pen its new novel, or is it just a descent into incoherence? Ryan and I poured a scotch and pulled up Hulu to check out this movie.
To our suffering, my dear.
There's not enough scotch in the world for that.
Shirley, what are you writing now?
A little novella. I'm calling none of your goddamn business.
Well, you were invited to stay here for a few days until we could find a place.
Shirley has these bouts.
She's gone sick in the head.
I read your story.
What are you doing in here?
It made me feel thrillingly horrible.
Do you know what it's like to have a secret?
One word I would choose to sum up Shirley is rich. There is just so much going on here. The movie will leave you thinking for hours after viewing, haunt you, and practically demand a second viewing in almost a Sixth Sense-ish sort of way. The plot centers around two newlyweds, an aspiring professor, Fred, and his lovely wife, Rose. The pair are given an opportunity to move in with a tenured professor, Stanley Hyman, and his wife, horror writer, Shirley Jackson. Quickly, Rose is sucked into the gravitational pull of Shirley when she's asked to set aside her plans to audit classes in order to do light housework, cooking, and caring for the writer who has sunken into crippling agoraphobia and substance abuse. The relationship between these two women is central to the movie, but in no way is it the only thing going on. At first, the pair are at odds, but soon become friends as Rose becomes Shirley's new muse for a project she had previously found vexing. What follows is a biopic that subverts its genre, is ingeniously self-aware, and picks at so many social scabs that it practically oozes off the screen. At the center of the movie is a tour de force performance from Elizabeth Moss. I am so glad to see her in a role like this after being disappointed by The Invisible Man earlier this year. I don't think it's crazy to say Oscar-worthy here, and honestly, I think in time, Moss will be up there with the likes of Streep. As Shirley Jackson, she masterfully balances the might of a powerful woman with a brilliant mind who is struggling with poor health, mental illness, writer's block, betrayal, and substance abuse. Shirley has become the local urban legend, the witch in the castle, a position she both relishes and despises equally. And these complicated emotions are conveyed effortlessly by Moss, who just embodies this character. Another standout is Michael Stuhlbarg as Jackson's intellectual husband. I found his performance deliciously conceited. Director Josephine Decker and cinematographer Strula Groveland uses handhelds in certain scenes that allow the audience to feel the drunken and unhinged qualities of Shirley's personality, and the color palette soaks with deep crimsons on an otherwise slightly muted 1950s pastel. It should also be noted that Martin Scorsese is an executive producer here, which makes sense, as the movie also could fairly be compared to The Joker in a way. At the end of the movie, you'll be thinking about motherhood, fidelity, marriage, mental issues, substance issues, body issues, the creative process, vision, magic, gender relations, intellectualism, jealousy, and so much more. But it doesn't feel overpacked, at least it didn't to me. As I noted at the top, there's just so much going on. To sum up, Shirley is my favorite movie of 2020 so far, and it's going to be a tough one to dethrone, Ryan. Did you agree? Did Shirley have a lot to say? And does it demand a rewatch? Or did I go for a deep dive in a puddle?
Wow. You handed me a loaded suitcase here. Let me try to unpack this. For starters, I was a fan of Shirley.
A loaded suitcase? Who the hell loads a suitcase?
I don't know, but you loaded it up with a bunch of stuff here, Matt. So let me unpack it here. For starters, I want to say this. I'm a fan of Shirley. I liked it quite a bit. Not as much as you by your enthusiastic review, and I'm glad that you liked it. Elizabeth Moss has been terrific. I liked her in The Invisible Man. I know we differentiate on that one, but I liked her in Elizabeth Man, and yes, she is excellent here. But the next Meryl Streep, slow down here. That might be a bit much.
In time.
Even still, that's still
she's
a little
on
much.
That path anyway.
Still much, no. How you worked into the Joker into this review, I'll never know. I saw a lot of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf in Shirley, and I like that movie, so I obviously like it here in Shirley. A topic idea that I've had in the works written down for Cinemajaw is top 5 creative biopics, and this would be one of them. The film works as a thriller of sorts, but it also shows us the inner workings and inspirations for a writer such as Shirley Jackson. There's a quote in the film that Shirley gives when talking about a missing girl. She says, "Maybe disappearing is the only way people will notice her." Shirley Jackson had a unique way of looking at things, and I think the film was able to show us that. Bravo to Josephine Decker. I'm a fan. Didn't like it as much as you. Gregory, where do you sit?
I'll probably go squarely in the middle of you two. I mean, surely this is a great film. But
there it is. I was going to do it if you didn't, man.
2020, I haven't seen a lot of pictures, so I don't know if I can put it at number one at the best. But in terms of biopics, one of the most creative, innovative, visually stunning things I've ever seen. The acting, tour de force, the music, unnerving and beautiful.
Yes.
The density of themes that you brought up, Matt, absolutely packed in there, but it never feels overstuffed. I don't know. It was such a shocking surprise. I know little to nothing about Shirley Jackson, and I loved this movie. Not having any, I just knew that she was a writer. I knew about The Haunting of Hill House, that she had written that, and I had seen that film. So beyond that, I knew nothing, and it didn't, hinder my viewing experience at all. In fact, maybe it only enhanced it because it allowed me to come in without those preconceived notions. Absolutely, high up there on my list.
Yeah, the ending of the film, and again, we're going to dance around spoilers here. We're not going to spoil this film for anybody who hasn't seen it yet. But at the ending of the film is really when it went up a humongous notch for me because
Oh, you love these kind of endings.
oh, I do. I eat these up. I mean, this is the kind of film it ends, and I'm like, yes, I'm applauding. I got the little screening room, and I'm all by myself, and I'm just applauding at the end. I know there's nobody can hear me, but I applaud the movie at the end because I thought, wow, they really landed this thing perfectly. Did you like the ending with the whole works of it all?
Yeah, there's an ambiguity to the ending. It's sort of edited two ways, if you will. It's like when a chef makes duck two ways, right? So you can sort of take from it what you will, enjoy it how you choose to enjoy it. And that's why I said it almost demands a second viewing, because the ending almost raises more questions than it answers. It brings into focus some unreliable narration, perhaps. So yes, I loved the ending. I thought it was extremely well handled.
Yeah, and I think, something that happens in the ending, we won't go into specifics, but is woven throughout the entire picture is the idea of subjectivity, right? This is a who knows what, when, and can we trust what they know and what they're, what we're being presented as the audience. And I loved that from the very get-go of the film. The way in which, I don't know if you noticed, the sound design is used to have people whizzing past this young couple as they approach the house at the very beginning of the film is so enhanced. And so you realize from the very beginning, you're getting a sort of subjective view of this world that they're entering. And I just loved that.
Yeah, and you mentioned how the score heightens, some of the tensions on screen, but also they use a lot of natural sounds that actually heighten things also. So there's moments where dogs are barking. And again, I got the surround sound cranked, but you could hear dogs barking really loudly at certain points in the scene. And it's like, wow, it just does something to the viewing experience during that, couple of moments when somebody's talking, there's dogs barking, everything mixed together really well, sound design wise.
Absolutely. Creaky floorboards, stuff like that. There's also a reoccurring use of mirrors, which I'm actually sort of getting tired of as a trope I see being used quite a bit. But I think it was done really well, and that's something I need to re-explore when I watch this movie a second time, because I didn't quite understand. Maybe you guys did, what the director was going for with all the mirrors.
Well, I mean, obviously Shirley is getting inspiration for her stories, within this. So maybe I'm just spitting stuff out here, but maybe this is Shirley looking into a reflection and what she sees out of everyday life and how she crafts that into her own story.
I just love the use of doppelgangers, right? That the doubling. So maybe the mirrors is an obvious form of doubling, but just the young author and the professor and Rose, right? That young couple kind of reflects Shirley and her husband, right? So there's kind of that happening.
True.
So I kind of, yeah, and even the girl who has disappeared being reflected back into Rose, and just kind of these reflections and fractals of people's personalities and what they look like and who they are. It's very fascinating.
And on that note, sometimes I'll watch movies, and when I know we're going to talk about it on Cinemajaw, I'll have a journal with me and I'll just write down things. Talk about doppelganger. So the girl who went missing was Paula, and Rose was the girl visiting the professor. In my notes, I looked back, and at some point I switched my notes, started calling Rose Paula. And I thought, oh my God, reading back my notes was crazy. And I thought, God, what a great job they did in the movie that all of a sudden I was writing down Paula for Rose. That's pretty awesome.
It's funny you bring that up. And one of my favorite moments in the whole movie is when it's very early on, when she's sort of Shirley is imagining writing this girl for her novel, and the face of the girl is completely blurred. And if you've ever written a screenplay or any piece of fiction or whatever, as you're filling in those details, you don't really quite have it yet. You just know it's something. And then when Rose arrives, that face starts to get filled in with Rose's face. And I thought, wow, that's such an incredible way of exploring the experience of writing, but also kind of creating that a relationship between the doppelgangers.
This is also a tremendously intelligent movie, or at least I found it to be. It's almost at times like conceited right on its sleeves, right? And there's this wonderful quote by Shirley Jackson's husband in here where they're sitting at table and he had just read the dissertation from Fred, who is the young man who's Rose's husband. And he kind of rips it a new one, and the young couple departs, and him and Shirley have a laugh, and he says, "You know how insulted I am by mediocrity. If it was awful, that would have been exciting, but terrifically competent, there's no excuse for that." I just loved that quote, dude. I'm gonna use that on Cinemajaw at some point, I guarantee.
You just did.
And I think you just brought up it's so quotable for something so dense, and also the performances are incredible. When he comes up to Rose, the professor, and he says, "I insist that you call me Stanley," and he's got these flecks of food in his mouth, and he's just so devious. It's fantastic, and you can feel how uncomfortable she is. And it's just, the movie is riddled with those moments.
Yeah, it really is. It's definitely a 2 or 3 watcher easily.
Wow, we are all big fans of Shirley. Matt, you got a movie poster quote for us?
Yeah, I do, but I'm lazy on it. I'm just going with what I said in my review. Shirley is a biopic that subverts its genre, is ingeniously self-aware, and picks at so many social scabs that it practically oozes off the screen. I was pretty pleased with that turn of phrase, so I used it again.
Yeah, that is really weak. I went with...
Let's see what you got.
I went with Shirley, streaming for free on Hulu. It's like you won the lottery.
I don't think that's very good at all.
The lottery in quotes, my friend.
Oh, okay. I see what you did there. Right.
Yeah.
A Shirley Jackson short story, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you don't put it in quotes, Matt doesn't get. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't get it.
Yeah, okay. You got a poster quote here for us, Greg?
Again, not prepared, but maybe I would go with a film that demands to be read because of all the red symbolism.
I like it.
But also read because it's literary. I don't know.
Hey,
it's pretty good. I mean, you're going right off the cuff, dude. I give you props. I get to think about this, and I still fail.
Yeah, it's way better than Matt's.
I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. What is real? Maybe that would be.
Dude, sorry, Miss Jack. There you go.
All right. 4-Jaw scale, Matt K.
4 Jaws.
4 Jaws from Matt K.
Yeah.
His movie of the year. Gregory.
I'm going to go 4 as well. Yeah, I really can't argue with it.
I'm at 3.5 Jaws. 3.5. So big fans. We can't recommend this one enough, I guess. It is streaming on video on demand if you don't have Hulu. If you have Hulu and you're a subscriber, just go to Hulu. Type it in. Shirley, it's there to stream. It's been actually a pretty good month. Now we got the 5 Bloods to watch. The King of Staten Island's on video on demand. At least they got some stuff coming out on the home market that we're able to watch.
I know. I'm just I'm going through superhero movie withdrawals here. I'm ready, but there's no summer tentpole season, man. It's just not coming together. But I agree. I'm excited for the ones you just mentioned.
All right, here we end the job with trivia as we do each and every week on Cinemajaw. And in honor of The Vast of Night being a debut feature, I decided to do the topic this week as directing debuts is the subject matter. Gregory, you're our guest. You get to choose if you want to go first. Let Matt K go first. There are steals, and if you get hung up on any questions, you get one rescue. Rescue me, Ryan. I have clues to all the questions.
I think I'm going to be bold and just dive in feet first. I'll go first.
Question 1 over to Gregory. They start off easy. Here we go. Quentin Tarantino's first feature film, Reservoir Dogs. Who played Mr. Pink, who doesn't believe in tipping?
I believe that was Steve Buscemi.
That is correct. Steve Buscemi. 1-0. Yep, Buscemi. 1-0. Gregory. Question 2 over to Matt K. Matt, before making the Spider-Man movies with Tobey Maguire, this director made his debut with The Evil Dead.
Sam Raimi. Jeez.
There we go. All right, I got him off the board. Everybody's got their easy ones. There we go. We get a little bit harder here over to Gregory. Question 3. Ryan Coogler's debut feature was Fruitvale Station, where he worked with this actor for the first time. He would later work with him again in Creed and Black Panther. Name the actor.
Was it Michael B. Jordan?
That is correct. Yes, Michael B. Jordan. 2-1, Gregory. Question 4 over to Matt K. Matt, Steve McQueen His debut feature was Hunger, where he worked with this actor for the first time. Later, he would work with him on Shame and 12 Years a Slave. Name the actor. Matt's in deep thought.
I'm having a classic hot seat brain fart here because I'm pretty sure it's Magneto. If I can just come up with his name, Michael Fassbender.
That is correct. Yes, Michael Fassbender. Whew, everybody perfect through the first half of the round here. 2-2. Question 5, back over to Gregory. Wes Anderson's debut was Bottle Rocket, where he worked with this actor, who he later worked with on The Life Aquatic and The Darjeeling Limited, among others. Sort of a tricky question because you got to think about it a little bit here.
He uses a lot of the same actors over and over again, but I think it was Owen was in all of those. Owen Wilson.
That is correct, yes. Luke Wilson, not in The Darjeeling Limited or The Life Aquatic. 3-2. Greg, question 6 over to Matt K. Matt, Amy Heckerling's debut was Fast Times at Ridgemont High. She also directed Clueless. Which actress starred as Cher in that film?
Alicia Silverstone.
That is correct, yes. Wow, I made him too easy this week.
Well, you gave me a 90s movies question, dude, and I'm going to nail it.
Question 7 over to Gregory. These were my two hardest ones I have written down, so we'll see how they do, guys. Question 7. Before the Wachowskis made The Matrix, they had their debut feature in 1996, which starred Gina Gershon and Jennifer Tilly. Name the movie.
I think it was called Bound.
Wow. No rescues needed here. He is absolutely perfect.
I even knew that one.
Wow. It is.
I'm a big Jennifer Tilly fan.
Who isn't?
Yeah.
4-3, and question 8 is over to Matt K. Matt, Wonder Woman director Patty Jenkins made her debut feature in 2003. Name the movie.
We've talked about it on the show.
It's come up, yeah.
It was nothing like Wonder Woman. Oh wait, I gotta rescue me, Ryan. Go ahead, rescue me, Ryan.
Charlize Theron stars in the film.
Monster.
That is correct. Yes, absolutely. Wow. Everybody's perfect. 4-4. It comes down to a tiebreaker. And the tiebreaker is this. Age of Owen Wilson, closest to. Matt, you got to guess.
Owen. You know, I don't know which of the two is the older and which of the two is the younger. I think Owen's the older brother. I could be wrong. They're both older than me by, I would say, probably 10 years. So I would say he's 52 years old.
Lock him in at 52. Gregory, what's your guess?
Oh, I have no idea. I'm gonna go a little bit younger. I'm gonna say that he's 48.
We give that one to Matt K. He's 51. 51. Wow.
That was a damn good game of trivia, sir.
That was close.
That was. You guys rocked that thing, man. Yeah. Perfect. 4-4.
Here's a virtual fist bump for you, man.
I'll take it. Yeah, that I would never be one of those guys at the carnival guessing ages or weights. That's not my.
That's Matt. Matt's totally.
Yeah.
No, what do you call those? The people who work the circuses?
Oh, carny.
Yeah, that's you. You're a carny.
I am. It's true. I got a little carny blood in me, but who doesn't really?
Most of us don't, but that's great that you do.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by that sort of thing. Always.
Yeah. Brings us to the end of a great jaw. And first and foremost, we got to thank our guest, Gregory. Great to meet you, and thanks for coming on Cinemajaw.
Thanks for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.
Matt, we also got to thank our sponsors.
Yes, thanks to Overcast and the Chicago Podcast Co-op, who help us get great sponsors like them.
If you would like to support Cinemajaw, the easiest way to do so is by leaving us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast.
And while you're at it, please click subscribe. And if you feel like joining us on Patreon, we are at patreon.com/Cinemajaw.
Until next week, I'm Ryan, the movie guy.
I'm Matt Kay. And keep on jawing about the movies.